My name is Zara Blackwell, and at 28, I thought I understood family loyalty. That was before my sister Melody fired me on her first day as CEO of our family's luxury jewelry empire. The irony? She had no idea I had been secretly documenting her embezzlement for months. While she smiled smugly behind our father's mahogany desk, explaining how the company needed fresh direction without dead weight, I could barely contain my laughter. You see, Melody always assumed I was the naive little sister who handled social media while she managed the real business. She never suspected that my photography degree came with a minor in forensic accounting, or that every fake invoice, every redirected payment, every stolen design was already compiled in a file marked insurance policy. As security escorted me out, I realized this was not my ending, it was my beginning. Before we dive into how I turned my sister's betrayal into the most satisfying revenge story you have ever heard, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button if you are ready for some serious family drama, and make sure to subscribe because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. Trust me, you will want to see how this sister rivalry explodes into an empire-shaking scandal that nobody saw coming. The Blackwell family business started 3 generations ago when my great-grandfather opened a small jewelry shop in downtown Portland. By the time Dad inherited it, Blackwell Luxury had become a multi-million-dollar operation with boutiques across the Pacific Northwest. Growing up, Melody and I both knew we would eventually join the family business, but our paths could not have been more different. Melody was the golden child. Valedictorian, business degree from Stanford, internships at prestigious firms. She returned home 5 years ago with grand plans to modernize everything. Dad was so proud of her corporate experience that he immediately made her vice president of operations. Meanwhile, I took what everyone considered the softer path. After my photography and digital media degree, I became creative director, handling our online presence, product photography, and marketing campaigns. Everyone assumed I was content with my creative bubble while Melody handled the serious business side. They had no idea I had fallen in love with forensic accounting during an elective course. My professor, Dr. Martinez, used to say that financial crimes were just stories told in numbers, and photographers naturally understood how to spot when something looked wrong in the frame. The first red flag appeared 8 months ago during a routine social media audit. I was organizing product photos when I noticed inconsistencies in our inventory posts. Pieces that should have been in our flagship store were mysteriously absent, yet our system showed them as sold at full retail price. When I casually asked Melody about it, she brushed me off, saying the system occasionally lagged behind reality. But photographers notice details others miss. I started paying closer attention to the numbers behind my pretty pictures. Each time I photographed new inventory, I cross-referenced it with sales reports. The pattern became undeniable. Expensive pieces were disappearing from inventory without corresponding customer sales, yet someone was generating revenue reports showing they had been sold. My breakthrough came during our annual family dinner 3 months ago. Melody was bragging about exceeding quarterly projections again, but I had the inventory numbers memorized. The math was impossible unless pieces were being sold through unauthorized channels. That night, I started what I called my insurance policy, a comprehensive documentation project disguised as updating our digital catalog. Every morning, I arrived early to photograph inventory. Every evening, I cross-referenced those photos with sales reports, shipping manifests, and bank deposits. The discrepancies were staggering. Melody had created an elaborate shell game using fake customer accounts and redirected payments. High-end pieces were being sold to private collectors at below-market rates, with the profits flowing into accounts that definitely were not ours. The most damning evidence came from her computer. As creative director, I had administrative access to our shared servers for uploading marketing materials. Buried in her personal folder were communications with underground jewelry dealers, price lists for black market sales, and detailed records of every theft dating back 4 years. She had stolen nearly $200,000 worth of inventory and laundered it through fake sales records. But the coup de grace was discovering she had been preparing to frame me for the thefts. Hidden in her files was a fabricated paper trail showing that I had been using my inventory access to steal pieces for my struggling photography business. She had even created fake invoices suggesting I owed money to various creditors, providing a clear motive for embezzlement. The most chilling part was realizing this was not impulsive greed. This was a calculated plan to destroy me while enriching herself. Every family dinner where she praised my artistic contributions while subtly undermining my business knowledge was part of building a narrative that I was irresponsible with money and naive about operations. As I compiled the evidence, I realized Melody was not just stealing from the business. She was stealing my inheritance, my reputation, and my future. But she had made one crucial mistake. She assumed her little sister with the camera was too stupid to notice numbers. That assumption was about to cost her everything. Discovery is one thing. Knowing what to do with explosive information is entirely different. The night I finished compiling the evidence, I sat in my apartment staring at 300 pages of documentation that could destroy my sister's life. Part of me wanted to march into Dad's office immediately, but 4 years of business school had not taught Melody everything. She had never learned that the best revenge requires patience and precision. I spent 2 weeks analyzing every angle. Simply exposing the theft would hurt Melody, but it would also devastate our family business and potentially destroy Dad's legacy. Worse, Melody would likely claim I had fabricated everything to cover my own crimes, using the fake evidence she had already prepared. Her word against mine, and she had years of building credibility as the responsible daughter while I was dismissed as the creative dreamer. No, I needed something more sophisticated. This required what I called the photograph approach, waiting for the perfect moment when lighting, composition, and timing aligned to capture the truth in a way that could not be denied or dismissed. My strategy crystallized when Dad announced his retirement plans. He intended to transition leadership over 6 months, giving Melody time to prove herself before taking full control. This timeline was perfect. It gave me exactly what I needed to document ongoing crimes while positioning myself to maximize impact. First, I needed allies who could not be dismissed or intimidated. I reached out to Marcus Chin, our longtime accountant, under the pretense of updating financial photography for marketing materials. Marcus had always been meticulous, and when I casually mentioned some interesting discrepancies I had noticed while cataloging inventory, he immediately became concerned. Within a week, he was quietly conducting his own audit, and my documentation provided the roadmap he needed to uncover the full scope of the embezzlement. Next, I needed legal protection. My college roommate Sarah had become a prosecutor specializing in white-collar crime. During a seemingly casual coffee catch-up, I mentioned a hypothetical situation about financial crimes in family businesses. She explained exactly what evidence would be needed for prosecution and connected me with a private investigator who specialized in corporate theft cases. The private investigator, Rebecca Torres, was a former FBI forensic accountant who now helped businesses document employee theft for legal proceedings. When I showed her my compiled evidence, she was impressed, but insisted we needed to catch Melody in the act with independent witnesses. She helped me install discrete monitoring software on our shared business systems and coached me on creating legally admissible documentation. Meanwhile, I began subtly undermining Melody's narrative about my business incompetence. I started asking pointed questions during family meetings, demonstrating deeper understanding of our operations than anyone expected. I volunteered to help with inventory management and financial reconciliation, positioning myself as someone trying to learn rather than someone already investigating. The most crucial element was timing the revelation for maximum impact. Simply exposing the theft privately would allow Melody to spin the story or negotiate a quiet departure. I needed a moment when the truth would be undeniable and public, forcing consequences that could not be minimized or hidden. That opportunity came when Melody announced she wanted to celebrate her promotion with a major publicity campaign showcasing new leadership and family values. She planned a grand reopening event for our flagship store, complete with media coverage, industry VIPs, and a presentation about the future of the Blackwell legacy. She was so confident in her victory that she wanted to broadcast it to the world. Perfect. I immediately volunteered to handle all photography and videography for the event, positioning myself to document not just the celebration, but the moment when everything unraveled. By this point, I had enough evidence to send Melody to prison, but I wanted something more poetic. I wanted her to destroy herself in front of everyone who mattered. The final piece fell into place when I discovered Melody's ultimate plan. She was not content with just stealing inventory. She intended to sell the entire business to a competitor and disappear with the proceeds. Her timeline had her completing the sale within 3 months of taking control, using falsified financial records to inflate the company's value. She planned to frame the inventory shortages on operational changes during the transition, and by the time anyone realized the scope of the theft, she would be long gone. But I had something she did not know about. Complete documentation of every crime, a network of credible allies ready to testify, law enforcement contacts prepared to act, and a front-row seat to watch her celebration become her funeral. The photographer in me appreciated the irony. Melody had spent years creating the perfect image of herself as the responsible heir, but I was about to capture the moment when that carefully crafted facade shattered beyond repair. The next 6 weeks became an intricate dance of preparation while maintaining the illusion that nothing had changed. Melody was so focused on her grand plans that she never noticed her little sister had transformed from naive observer into calculating strategist. Every day brought new evidence of her crimes, and every interaction revealed more details about her exit strategy. Marcus Chin proved invaluable as an ally. His decades of managing our family's finances gave him credibility that could not be questioned, and his genuine shock at discovering the embezzlement made him a passionate advocate for justice. Together, we developed a system where I would identify discrepancies during my inventory photography sessions, and he would trace the financial trail through official channels. This collaboration gave us ironclad documentation that satisfied both artistic evidence and forensic accounting standards. The private investigator Rebecca Torres brought a level of professionalism that elevated our amateur detective work into prosecution-ready evidence. She taught me how to create legally admissible chains of custody for documents, how to timestamp digital evidence properly, and most importantly, how to gather information without compromising potential criminal cases. Under her guidance, we installed monitoring software that tracked every transaction Melody made through our business systems. What we discovered was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. Melody had not simply been stealing inventory. She had created an entire parallel business structure designed to systematically drain our family company while building her personal wealth. She had established relationships with black market dealers across 3 states, created sophisticated money laundering schemes through fake consulting contracts, and even recruited employees at our subsidiary locations to unknowingly facilitate theft through falsified shipping records. The most damaging revelation came when Rebecca uncovered communication between Melody and the competitor planning to purchase our business. These emails revealed that Melody had been feeding them confidential information about our operations, client lists, and strategic plans for over 2 years. The proposed purchase price was deliberately undervalued because the buyer knew exactly what assets were missing and what debts were hidden. Melody was not just selling the family business. She was actively sabotaging its value to ensure a quick sale that would benefit her personal timeline. But perhaps the most chilling discovery was the detailed psychological profile Melody had developed about each family member. Her files contained strategies for manipulating Dad's pride in her accomplishments, exploiting Mom's desire to avoid family conflict, and leveraging my apparent lack of business sophistication. She had turned family psychology into a weapon for financial gain, and reading her clinical analysis of how to control and deceive the people who loved her was genuinely disturbing. During this period, I had to become an actress worthy of an Academy Award. Every family dinner required me to maintain the facade of the supportive younger sister excited about Melody's promotion. I complimented her leadership decisions while secretly photographing the evidence of their fraud. I asked innocent questions about business operations while actually gathering details about her criminal network. Most challenging of all, I had to express enthusiasm for her grand reopening event while knowing I planned to use it as the stage for her destruction. The stress of maintaining this double life was incredible, but it was also empowering. For years, I had been dismissed as the artistic sister who handled pretty pictures while Melody managed serious business. Now I was running the most complex investigation in our company's history while she remained oblivious to the trap closing around her. Every condescending comment about my lack of business knowledge became fuel for my determination to see justice served. My strategy required recruiting additional allies without revealing the full scope of my knowledge. I reached out to longtime employees who had expressed private concerns about recent changes in company operations. Store managers had noticed discrepancies in inventory transfers, but they assumed these were growing pains from leadership transition. When I began asking careful questions about their observations, several employees confided suspicions that something was not right. The breakthrough came when Janet Rodriguez, our flagship store manager, mentioned that expensive pieces kept disappearing from displays overnight, only to reappear in system records as sold to customers she had never seen. Janet had 20 years of experience with the company and knew every regular client personally. When pieces worth thousands of dollars were supposedly sold to people she did not recognize, she had started keeping her own informal records. Janet's documentation correlated perfectly with my evidence of Melody's black market sales. Together, we identified a pattern where Melody would remove high-value items during her evening inventory checks, generate fake sales receipts overnight, and then claim the pieces had been sold to out-of-state customers who preferred private transactions. Janet agreed to serve as a witness and help me gather additional evidence during the weeks leading up to the grand reopening. As the event date approached, I finalized my preparation with law enforcement contacts. My prosecutor friend Sarah had connected me with Detective Williams from the Financial Crimes Unit, who reviewed our evidence and confirmed it was sufficient for criminal charges. However, he recommended we allow Melody to complete at least one more theft in front of witnesses to strengthen the case for ongoing criminal enterprise rather than simple employee theft. This timing aligned perfectly with my planned revelation at the grand reopening event. Melody had already selected several pieces for her final major theft, rare vintage items worth over $50,000 that she planned to liquidate immediately after the event. Detective Williams would be present as an invited guest, ready to make arrests once we documented this final crime in progress. The irony was delicious. Melody had planned this event as her victory celebration and farewell performance before disappearing with our family's legacy. Instead, it would become the stage where years of careful deception unraveled in front of everyone who mattered in our industry. She had always accused me of being too focused on getting the perfect shot. Soon, she would discover that I had spent months positioning her for the most devastating photograph of her life. But this story is just getting started, and trust me when I say that what happened next exceeded even my most optimistic expectations for cosmic justice. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, and sometimes that humor comes with handcuffs and felony charges. Stay tuned because the grand reopening event is about to become the most spectacular downfall you have ever witnessed. The morning of the grand reopening arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp, clear, and absolutely ideal for the photographic documentation I had planned. Melody was practically glowing with anticipation as she strutted through the flagship store, directing final preparations for what she believed would be her coronation as the new queen of the Blackwell Empire. She had no idea she was actually preparing for her own funeral. The guest list read like a who's who of the Pacific Northwest jewelry industry: competitors, suppliers, media contacts, and longtime family friends. Detective Williams arrived early, positioned as a family friend interested in investing in luxury retail. Marcus Chin mingled naturally among the financial professionals, his accounting credentials making him an obvious attendee. Janet Rodriguez managed the store operations with her usual professionalism while keeping detailed notes about every piece Melody handled. I positioned myself strategically throughout the space, ostensibly capturing the celebration for our marketing materials while actually documenting every moment of what would become evidence in criminal proceedings. My photography equipment gave me legitimate access to every corner of the store, every conversation, and every transaction. The event began beautifully from Melody's perspective. She delivered a polished presentation about modernizing our family legacy while honoring traditional craftsmanship. Industry leaders praised her vision and business acumen. Local media captured glowing interviews about the next generation taking the reins of a beloved Portland institution. For 2 hours, Melody basked in the validation she had craved her entire life. But I knew the timeline. Based on her previous patterns, Melody would execute her final theft during the transition between the formal presentation and the evening reception. She had already identified her targets: 3 vintage Art Deco pieces worth approximately $60,000 that were scheduled for transfer to our vault the following Monday. This would be her last opportunity to steal them before the enhanced security measures she had publicly announced would make theft more difficult. At exactly 4:30, as guests moved from the presentation area to the reception space, I watched Melody slip away toward the private office behind our main display area. I followed at a discreet distance, camera ready, while Detective Williams positioned himself with a clear view of the office entrance. Janet Rodriguez maintained her post at the main register, ready to document any inventory discrepancies immediately. Through the office window, I captured the moment when Melody opened our secured display case and removed the 3 targeted pieces. My camera's silent mode allowed me to document her transferring the jewelry into a personal bag, followed by her accessing our computer system to generate false sales receipts. She was so confident in her routine that she never bothered to check for observers. The beauty of this moment was not just catching her in the act, but capturing her emotional state. Years of photography had taught me to recognize authentic expressions, and the look on Melody's face as she handled stolen merchandise was pure satisfaction. She genuinely believed she had outsmarted everyone and was moments away from financial freedom. The contrast between her public persona as the responsible family heir and her private reality as a calculating thief was artistically perfect. When Melody emerged from the office, she encountered Detective Williams examining a display case near the entrance. Their conversation appeared casual. He complimented her leadership and asked technical questions about our security measures. She answered confidently, even pointing out the various protective systems she had personally implemented. The irony was exquisite. She was literally explaining to a police detective how she had made theft more difficult while carrying stolen merchandise in her purse. I continued photographing the reception, capturing Melody's interactions with guests who praised her integrity and business ethics. Every compliment about her character, every comment about trusting the next generation with the family legacy, every prediction about her bright future. All of it recorded while evidence of her crime sat in her bag mere feet away. The culmination came during the evening's final presentation. Melody had planned to announce a major expansion initiative that would require selling certain vintage pieces to finance new inventory. This announcement was actually cover for liquidating the stolen items, but the audience interpreted it as bold strategic thinking. As applause filled the room, I noticed Detective Williams discreetly speaking into his radio. The transformation was swift and devastating. One moment, Melody was accepting congratulations from industry leaders. The next, Detective Williams was approaching her with his credentials visible. The room fell silent as he requested to speak with her privately about some questions regarding inventory management. Melody's confident smile flickered as she realized this was not a social conversation. I continued photographing as the reality sank in. Melody's expression shifted from confusion to concern to dawning horror as Detective Williams explained that they had been investigating reports of inventory discrepancies. When he requested to examine the contents of her bag, the color drained from her face completely. The stolen jewelry was exactly where we knew it would be, along with the falsified sales receipts and documentation of her black market contacts. As Detective Williams explained her rights, I captured the moment when Melody's carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. The woman who had spent years positioning herself as the responsible family leader was revealed as a common thief who had betrayed everyone who trusted her. But this was only the beginning. As Detective Williams made the arrest, he explained that this was part of a comprehensive investigation into embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy charges that could result in decades of prison time. The small-scale theft she was caught committing was merely the final piece of evidence in a case documenting years of systematic fraud. The guests watched in stunned silence as Melody was led away in handcuffs, her grand celebration transformed into a perp walk broadcast live on local news. The woman who had planned to disappear with our family's fortune was instead disappearing into the criminal justice system, facing charges that would ensure she never touched another dollar of anyone else's money. As I lowered my camera, I realized this was the most satisfying photograph I would ever take. Not because of its artistic merit, but because it captured the exact moment when justice arrived for someone who thought they were too smart to face consequences. The silence that followed Detective Williams escorting Melody from the store was unlike anything I had ever experienced. 200 guests who had come to celebrate the next generation of Blackwell leadership stood frozen, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The golden child, the Stanford graduate, the responsible heir apparent had just been arrested for stealing from her own family business during her own celebration. Dad was the first to break. I watched my 70-year-old father, who had built this empire through decades of honest work, collapse into a chair as the full implications hit him. This was not just about Melody's crimes. This was about the destruction of everything he had worked to build. The family name, the business reputation, the legacy he had hoped to pass down, all of it was crumbling in real time. Mom's reaction was perhaps even more heartbreaking. She kept repeating that there must be some mistake, that Melody would never do anything to hurt the family. Even with the evidence literally caught in Melody's purse, Mom's maternal instincts refused to accept that her daughter was a criminal. Watching her try to reconcile the child she had raised with the person who had just been arrested was genuinely painful. The media response was immediate and merciless. Within an hour, news vans surrounded our store. The story had everything journalists loved: family drama, betrayal, white-collar crime, and the spectacular downfall of someone who had been presented as a business success story. Local news anchors who had interviewed Melody just hours earlier were now reporting on her arrest for embezzlement and fraud. But the personal devastation was nothing compared to the business implications. Marcus Chin worked through the night with Detective Williams and federal investigators to determine the full scope of the financial damage. What we discovered was even worse than my documentation had suggested. Melody's thefts totaled over $400,000 across 4 years, but the damage to our business relationships and reputation was potentially catastrophic. Several major suppliers immediately froze our credit accounts pending investigation. Insurance companies launched their own audits to determine coverage for theft by family members. Most devastating of all, 3 of our largest corporate clients canceled contracts worth over $2 million, citing concerns about our internal controls and business ethics. Melody had not just stolen money, she had poisoned relationships that took decades to build. The legal ramifications expanded rapidly. Federal prosecutors filed charges for wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering based on Melody's multi-state criminal network. The FBI seized her personal assets, including a luxury condo and expensive car purchased with stolen funds. Her black market contacts were arrested across 3 states, unraveling a criminal enterprise that had been operating for years. Personal relationships exploded along with professional ones. Extended family members who had invested money based on Melody's financial projections demanded immediate repayment. Friends who had vouched for her character felt betrayed and humiliated. Her Stanford classmates distanced themselves as news coverage spread nationally, afraid that association with her would damage their own careers. The most painful revelation came when investigators discovered that Melody had been planning to frame not just me, but also several longtime employees for various thefts. She had prepared evidence suggesting that Janet Rodriguez had been stealing cash from registers, that Marcus Chin had been manipulating books to hide his own embezzlement, and that Dad himself had been complicit in tax evasion schemes. Her escape plan involved destroying multiple innocent lives to cover her crimes. But perhaps the most telling discovery was her personal diary, seized during the search of her apartment. Entry after entry revealed her complete contempt for our family, her resentment about having to work in what she considered a provincial business, and her detailed plans for using the stolen money to start a new life under a different identity. She had viewed all of us as obstacles to her desired lifestyle rather than family members deserving love and loyalty. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court painted a disturbing picture of someone who had spent years perfecting the ability to manipulate emotions while feeling no genuine connection to the people she was deceiving. The woman we had loved as daughter and sister had apparently never existed. She was simply a performance designed to extract maximum benefit from family relationships. Within a week, Melody's entire life had collapsed. Her job prospects were destroyed, her social connections severed, her financial assets frozen, and her freedom forfeit. The woman who had planned to disappear with stolen millions was instead facing 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of early release. Her carefully constructed image as the successful business heir had been replaced by mugshots on front pages across the region. The contrast was staggering. 7 days earlier, Melody had been the toast of Portland's business community, featured in magazine profiles about young entrepreneurs taking over family enterprises. Now she was a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and family betrayal, her name synonymous with greed and deception. But for me, watching this collapse was not entirely satisfying. Yes, justice was being served, but the cost to our family was enormous. Dad's health deteriorated rapidly under the stress. Mom barely left her bedroom for weeks. Our century-old business teetered on the edge of bankruptcy, and generations of honest work were overshadowed by one person's criminal choices. Yet something unexpected was emerging from the wreckage. Employees who had been intimidated by Melody's aggressive management style began speaking up about problems they had noticed, but been afraid to report. Suppliers who had felt pressured into unfavorable deals started reaching out to renegotiate fair terms. Even some competitors offered assistance, recognizing that Melody's crimes were not representative of our family's true values. The investigation had revealed the truth about Melody, but it had also revealed something important about everyone else. That the majority of people involved with our business were fundamentally decent and willing to help rebuild rather than exploit our vulnerability. 6 months after Melody's arrest, I stood in the same flagship store where her world had collapsed, but everything had changed. The space felt different, lighter somehow, as if a toxic presence had been removed and we could finally breathe freely. What had initially seemed like the destruction of our family legacy had actually become its rebirth under more authentic leadership. Dad's decision to make me CEO had surprised everyone, including myself. For years, I had been dismissed as the creative daughter who handled pretty pictures while serious business people made important decisions. But the investigation had proven that my attention to detail, ability to see patterns others missed, and commitment to honest relationships were exactly what our family business needed to rebuild trust and move forward. The transition was not easy. I spent months learning aspects of operations that Melody had deliberately kept hidden from me, working 18-hour days to master everything from supply chain management to financial forecasting. But unlike my sister, I did not try to control everything alone. Instead, I built a leadership team based on collaboration, transparency, and shared accountability. Marcus Chin became our chief financial officer, bringing decades of experience and the credibility of someone who had helped expose the fraud rather than participate in it. Janet Rodriguez was promoted to vice president of operations, her years of frontline experience proving invaluable in rebuilding employee morale and customer confidence. We hired Rebecca Torres as our director of compliance, ensuring that the monitoring systems we implemented would prevent future fraud while protecting legitimate business operations. The business recovery exceeded everyone's expectations. Customers appreciated our commitment to transparency about what had happened and what we were doing to prevent recurrence. Suppliers respected our willingness to renegotiate deals that Melody had imposed through manipulation and pressure. Even competitors acknowledged that we were rebuilding the right way, earning back trust through actions rather than promises. Most importantly, we had become a real family business rather than one person's personal empire. Employees felt comfortable raising concerns because they knew they would be heard rather than dismissed. Financial decisions were made collaboratively with full documentation rather than secretly by one individual. Our company culture transformed from fear-based compliance to genuine teamwork focused on shared success. The legal proceedings provided their own satisfaction. Melody ultimately pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a sentence of 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole before serving at least 10 years. The judge noted that her crimes had been particularly heinous because they exploited family trust and threatened the livelihoods of dozens of innocent employees. Her assets were liquidated to provide partial restitution, though the full financial recovery would take years. Perhaps most tellingly, Melody never expressed genuine remorse for her actions. Even during sentencing, her apologies focused on getting caught rather than the harm she had caused. The woman who had spent years manipulating family emotions could not bring herself to feel authentic guilt about betraying people who had loved her unconditionally. But we had learned to build our happiness around people who actually cared about us rather than those who merely performed caring. Our new chosen family included employees who had proven their loyalty during crisis, suppliers who had offered assistance during rebuilding, and even some competitors who had demonstrated integrity when they could have exploited our vulnerability. The most unexpected gift came from customers who shared their own stories about family betrayal and business recovery. We discovered that our experience, while painful, was not unique. Many family businesses had survived similar crises by focusing on authentic relationships rather than individual ambition. Our transparency about what had happened and how we were moving forward actually strengthened customer loyalty because people appreciated honest communication about real challenges. Dad's health improved dramatically once the stress of wondering about business irregularities was resolved. Mom found peace by focusing on the family members who had proven their character rather than mourning the daughter who had never really existed. We realized that Melody's departure had actually restored our family's emotional health by removing someone who had been systematically manipulating and undermining genuine connections. My own growth surprised me most of all. For years, I had accepted the narrative that I was not smart enough for serious business responsibility. But running the investigation, rebuilding operations, and leading the company through crisis had proven that different types of intelligence were valuable in different situations. My artistic training in seeing patterns, capturing authentic moments, and telling stories through images translated directly into business skills that traditional education might never have taught. The photography background that Melody had dismissed as impractical became one of my greatest assets as CEO. The ability to see the whole composition while noticing important details, to wait patiently for exactly the right moment to act, and to document reality rather than create fiction. These skills served me perfectly in rebuilding our business based on substance rather than appearance. Today, Blackwell Luxury is stronger than ever, but more importantly, it represents values that we can genuinely be proud of. We learned that true family loyalty means holding each other accountable rather than enabling destructive behavior. We discovered that business success built on authentic relationships is more sustainable than growth achieved through manipulation and deception. Have you ever experienced family betrayal that ultimately led to positive change in your life? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below because sometimes the most painful experiences teach us the most important lessons about who deserves our trust and loyalty. If this story of family karma and justice resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it, subscribe for more real-life drama stories, and share this with anyone who might need to hear about how betrayal can actually become the foundation for building something better. Thank you for joining me on this journey from family victim to family leader, and I hope my experience reminds you that sometimes the people who underestimate us end up giving us exactly the motivation we need to prove them spectacularly wrong. Here is to building families based on character rather than convenience, businesses based on integrity rather than individual ambition, and lives based on authentic relationships rather than performed loyalty.